He's here now, that courageous man himself, Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul. Senator Paul, it's a pleasure and welcome here.
Good to be with you, Judge.
How is the proposal to cut $500 billion from the president's budget going with your fellow Republicans?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. What's kind of interesting is we had our first Tea Party caucus, and I went to that and I told them I had $500 billion, and everyone at the Tea Party caucus said, we need more. We've got a $1.5 trillion deficit. So to the Tea Party, it's not even enough. But if you talk to those in official Washington, they're like, oh my goodness, how could you do that? It's too dramatic. And I say to them, look, it's only a third of the problem we have. And if we take the president's plan, we'll add $4 trillion to the debt over 5 years. And if we do the Republican House plan, we'll add $3 trillion to the debt. So I think $500 billion is a good place to start. And then we have to look at entitlements even beyond that.
Well, what do you do beyond that? What do you do about entitlements? Surely no one is seriously suggesting that those who have contributed to Social Security for their entire adult working lives and are now receiving it would lose it. No one's suggesting that. But something needs to be done with Social Security, I suggest, Senator Paul, in the future. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's unconstitutional. We can't afford it. People can better take care of themselves than the government take care of them. So what would you do with or say to a 22-year-old or a 25-year-old entering the workforce today?
Well, I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is that it doesn't have any money there. The savings was spent in the general fund, and we now, for the first time, are paying out more in Social Security than comes in. We have to acknowledge that with the baby boomers retiring, we're going to have twice as many folks. We're going to go from 42 million retired to 77 million. So the demographics of this situation cause us to be short of money. That's the first thing everyone has to admit to. And so there are solutions. The solutions are really relatively simple, and everybody knows them. The solutions are that gradually you will have to change the age of eligibility, and gradually you will probably have to institute means testing. Now, most of us have said, you know, let's try to do this, let's get started with it, but let's try not to get the people who are nearing retirement or who are on retirement. So we're really looking at a cutoff, we're crunching the numbers, but the number looks like closer to those 55 and under, that there won't be a system left for them unless we do somehow change the age of eligibility.
Would we get to a point where Senator Barry Goldwater suggested this way back in 1964 and was excoriated for it? Social Security would be voluntary, and if you didn't want to enter into it, you didn't have to, and if you didn't enter into it, you didn't have to pay for it.
I got a good letter from a young man who worked in my campaign. He says, I really like your budget cuts. I'm glad you're going to let us look at Social Security reform. And then he put in his letter, P.S., can you please let me opt out? And so the young people given a choice would rather probably have their own account. I've said that, you know, I don't think we did a very good job of messaging and talking about Social Security.
Right.
But really, if you talked about individualizing the accounts, people realize, people now have 401ks and IRAs. They realize and can watch their account. It has their name on it. It's their money. I think if you presented the battle and presented the position that we were going to individualize the account, we were going to put a name on your account, I think overwhelming majorities of people would vote for it. There is an interim problem, though, because we're having all these new people retire, that if you left people opt out completely, that it creates more of a shortfall. So there are problems logistically trying to figure out how we get to a system of individual accounts.
Have you gotten any dirty looks from the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives, which thinks that a $38 billion cut is good enough, and here you come by with something that's nearly 20 times the size of that?
I haven't really met anybody in the leadership, but I have met a lot of the new freshmen that the Tea Party elected, and I can tell you of the 87 new freshmen, there's a bunch of them that want more significant cuts. There's a bunch of them that realize that Social Security and Medicare are teetering in the balance. And so I think you'll find a lot of boldness and a lot of brave new people. I've met several of them I think are really good in the House freshman class. And I'm not saying anything negative about others. I've just met a lot in the freshman class who I think are ready for some changes.
Switching gears slightly, will you vote to raise the debt ceiling if the $500 billion cut is not there, or if a balanced budget amendment proposed by your colleague Senator Lee is not there?
Yeah, I can't imagine voting to raise the debt ceiling unless we have a balanced budget amendment in place. I also want statutory caps in place in addition to a balanced budget amendment, so when we immediately start doing something good. And I think that you really have to have some kind of structural change. We have to start cutting spending immediately, but it can't be 2%. 30 some odd billion dollars cut in 1 year is a 2% cut of what the deficit is. Deficit's 1.5 trillion.
Right.
You can cut 30 billion for years and years, and you'll never ever get close to balancing the budget. So they're somewhat incongruous to say many Republicans are for a balanced budget amendment, but they're going to fix it by cutting 32 billion. They don't fit together. They don't jive.
It doesn't make sense to me how we can borrow more and spend less. But that vote is coming. We'll be interested to see the outcome. Senator Paul, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And while it's truly admirable that Senator Rand